A day da dum da day da dum dee day da dee da do. La dee dee dum dee dee dum.
Along this rugged coastline, sea and weather have formed the cliffs into headlands and inlets, and many small communities have lived here over time. Fishing, maybe lobster catching. But if you were to go along the base of the cliffs, you would see there's lots of caves hidden in the nooks and crannies, and these were used by smugglers. And they stashed the goods in these caves, and that supplemented the people's income. But how was this land formed? Eons ago, great land masses existed, and they began to shift and clash over thousands of years, being thrust upwards to impossible heights, and the tops began to crumble and were spread downwards to become new mountains and glens and coastlines. And here at Stonehaven in the east, we have the Highland Boundary Fault Line, which stretches diagonally south and west to Aberfoyle. One landmass to the north is granite and the other is sandstone, two very different landmasses side by side. The encased boulders and rocks that you can see behind me are known locally as pudding stone. But can you see how smooth and rounded they are? That could only happen if they've been under great pressure and pummeled with such violence to create this kind of smoothness. This is one indicator of the colossal seismic events that happened so long ago. Falls-Hugh Nature Reserve has cliffs that have been weathered so much they formed ledges, which are perfect for seabirds to nest. And in the spring, thousands of birds come here to breed. The first ones to arrive, some come to the bottom and others to the top. And the ones at the top, they're called fulmars, straight-backed winged, and they have to lay their eggs early because they have to be incubated for 60 days. Below them are the noisy ones, the kittiwakes. They're little gulls with black legs, and my goodness, what a noise they make. Kittiwake, kittiwake, kittiwake. You can't mistake them for anything else, and their young litter the cliffs during July. The ones that stand row on row with black backs and pale bellies, there's two kinds. There's the chocolate coloured ones, they're the guillemots, and the darker black ones are the razorbills, and they've got beautiful white markings on their faces. Both these birds lay an oval egg straight onto the ledge, and then they sit on it a wee bit like a penguin. And when the chick hatches, this fluffy thing grows so fast, and before long it's bouncing down the cliff to join the parents in the sea. But the one that most people want to see is the puffin, and it's the only one at Falls-Hugh that nests in a burrow. And the parents feed it until it gets to the point where they think it's old enough now, and then the wee one will come out for itself looking for food and jump into the sea. But when I worked on the Isle of May, it's a much bigger island, and when those little puffins came out their burrows, where's the cliff? And they would hide in the long grass until it was evening time. But the wardens were concerned about predators, so they'd pick them up, put them in nest boxes and then release them. And I found one, this wee black and white bird, and I picked it up and gave it a good cuddle before I put it into the nest box. So come end of summer, all these seabirds will leave the cliffs, and most of them head back out to sea until the following spring. A high rise of birds of every kind, the peck in order well defined. Shags black-winged o'er the sea, straight-backed fulmars sweep and glide. High-rise nestin', birds are wheelin', birds are stinkin'. Oh, what a sight to see, birds flying free above the sea. Dark-backed guillemots row on row, blacker still raise their bills below. Noisy kittiwakes with pretty young, orange-footed puffins, the seabird clown. High-rise nestin', birds are wheelin', birds are stinkin'. Oh, what a sight to see, birds flying free above the sea. In the village of Cowie beside Stonehaven, there lived a gravedigger, and he was a dreamer. And he had this reoccurring dream of gold buried in a cave on top of Dunnacare Stack. And he told this to the villagers, and some of the young men pricked up their ears, and they decided to go and have a look. So they climbed up this precarious sea stack. It was quite dangerous, and on the top they began to dig, and they were so enthusiastic to start with, but all they found was a stone wall with some picture stones. And they were so scunnered and disappointed that they howked those stones out the wall, flung them over into the sea. Well, the next morning, one of them, Donald Ross, came back and had a hunt through the low tide, and he found one of the stones, picked it up, took it home. Now, as an adult, he found out that archaeology was a very important subject, and that finding things like what they had found was an important part of history. So he returned to Dunnacare, and it was a bigger search this time, but he found another of their stones. And this one had a tiny triangle on it and a salmon below it. He took that home too. A few years later, he was visited by a man from the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland, and he bought those stones off Donald. And he'd also got another one from somebody else, a fisherman who'd previously been up on top of Dunnacare. Now, between 2015 and 17, archaeologists from University of Aberdeen came and did a dig. With the help of a mountaineer, they managed to get up. And they found that this was a very significant Pictish fort that was well established between the 1st and 4th century. And those stones, the picture stones, well, they're some of the earliest Pictish carvings that are known so far. And most of them, they're in the sea. Well, this used to be, they think, part of the mainland. It was attached. But by 1800, when those young men were climbing, it was separated, and there were actually 2 sea stacks, one of which is now in the water. But the Pictish people that were here, the community, it was already starting to fall into the sea. And the archaeologists think that they decided to shift onwards down to the site of Dunnottar Castle. The stone castle of Dunnottar has withstood the barrage of time, weather and war. There has been a stronghold here for so long, but not always an effective one. For in the 9th century, the Vikings burnt down what was here, and in the 13th century, there was an English garrison stationed. But William Wallace attacked. They hid in the newly built church, and he razed it to the ground, and them with it. But the following century, this place was bought by the Keith family. Now, they were one of the most prominent and wealthy families in the whole of Scotland, and they had the ear of the king. In fact, he created a new position, the Earl Marshal of Scotland. That was for William Keith. But that title remained in the family through generations. And this castle began to be built properly. First it was the stone keep, and then gradually the rest of it was strengthened and built up into the castle that we see today. And what a fortification it is. But today I'm just going to tell you one wee snippet of a story of something that happened here that had a huge effect for Scotland. In the mid-1600s, there was great unrest in Scotland. All Oliver Cromwell was head of the parliamentarian army, the Roundheads. They would not tolerate royalty nor Roman Catholicism. And Charles I, he had his head cut off. And his son, Charles, was crowned King of Scotland at Scone Palace just a year and a half later. And Cromwell was not happy. The honours were present. Now the honours was the crown, the gold ornate crown. There was the sceptre with the beautiful crystal, and above it the Scottish pearl, and the sword a metre long. These were part of the ceremony, and they were a most important symbol of royalty and the pride of the Scottish nation. So Cromwell reckoned they should be destroyed along with the royalty. And so he was marching north. By the time the ceremony was completed, he'd invaded Edinburgh. And so the honours could not be returned to the castle there. So Earl Marshal, he decided they should come to his castle, to Dunnottar. And secretly they were smuggled in by a woman in sacks of wool. And she also smuggled in the most important papers of the nation. And they remained here for a good few months. But the Roundheads came north and they surrounded Dunnottar and put it under siege. But for 8 months the garrison held out. But there was cannon approaching and they knew that they had to surrender. So how to get these precious things back out of the castle? Well, the commander's wife had a plan. Her kinswoman had come to visit, Anne Lindsay. And Elizabeth said to Anne, "Anne, you're going to have to take the papers back out, smuggle them out and get them away." "I can't do that," said Anne. "No, I won't. But this is for your country and for your king." And eventually she persuaded her. Although she was terrified, she had them sewn into her clothing. And when she left, she put on her cloak, and remembering Elizabeth's words, shoulders up, head up, eyes to the front, and keep walking, however you feel. Well, her legs were like wood, she could hardly get them to shift. And then something grabbed her arm, and she turned to see Elizabeth's maid. My mistress said to give you this." And she handed over a scroll and ran back. Anne looked down, and just as she did, a soldier came forward and he said, "I'll take that, thank you. Away you go." And the soldiers opened like the Red Sea, and she was away. Elizabeth's ruse had worked, and so the papers, the documentation was safe. But what of the honours? You can't put that on somebody's person. Well, the minister's wife, Christian, had a plan. Every morning an owl wifey would come down to the beach with her creel on her bent shoulder to gather seaweed. And this early morning the night watch were fed up. They were waiting for the morning guys to relieve them. They were hungry and tired, and they let the owl wifey through as they always did. And away down to the beach she went, and they took no more notice of her. They didn't see as she veered towards the castle. They didn't notice as a bundle was lowered out the window and into her creel. And then if they'd been looking, they would have seen the struggle she had getting it back up onto her shoulder, and the labour that she had to get back up that beach through the soldiers with this ridiculous high bundle of seaweed on her back. But she did. She brought them safely to the manse, and they were a bundle at the end of the minister's bed for a good few nights before they could safely dig a hole in Old Kenneth Kirk. The honours were wrapped up in linen, and they were carefully placed in that hole and covered up. But every few months he would dig down into the clay and he would take them out, clean them, and make sure that they weren't getting damaged in any way. For 9 years the honours stayed in that hole, and then they were removed back down to Edinburgh. And that's just one of the many stories of this castle that is well worth a visit.